in Baltimore in 1973. A group named Black October left a message. A threat that drug dealers would be executed. It was a missive aimed at the black community that the drug war would be fought on different terms. A promise to rid their community of a poison. To finish a job they claimed the police had left undone. The story that follows is a tale of a killing Black October claimed was theirs. A murder that remains unsolved, but not forgotten.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortunes, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing in them, when someone takes the life of another, does he need a reason? Maybe that was the question Hamlet was trying to answer. When do the ends justify the means? Is killing ever really necessary or even justified? And if a community is overwhelmed by crime, do they have the right to strike back? When does the question of why do we kill become when can we kill? Why do we kill?
The human mind, a source of beauty and violence. And yet it is violence that makes us unique. An impulse that we cannot control. But why does it persist, so natural and yet not? A question that lies at the root of many crimes. A question we ignore at our peril. Why do we kill?
Baltimore City, 1973. A once proud industrial hub, reeling from the loss of jobs. But there was a business that stepped up to fill the void. The drug trade, illicit commerce, that spread its influence through the neighborhood like a disease. And there was one man who tried to stop it. Former Lieutenant Stephen Tabeling stood at the crossroads of the drug war.
Our job was to investigate the drug business in Baltimore. What we learned is selling drugs had infiltrated all walks of life. Back then, the drug business, and in some cases legitimate businesses, were becoming one and the same.
But before Tabeling could finish his work, he was shut down. Tabeling and a squad of 4 had come too close to the truth.
We were shut down before our work was finished.
But Tabeling didn't give up. Through sweat and determination, he landed a job as lieutenant in the city's fabled Homicide squad. And that's when the career of Stephen Tabeling and the community's thirst for vengeance met face to face. Baltimore City, 1973. A city awash with drugs. And with the drug trade, violence. Amid the bloodshed, a murder in this parking garage, a targeted killing, an execution.
I got a call from one of my detectives, and he said, "Lieutenant, you better come down here." And that's the kind of call that means trouble.
Tabeling arrived here to find a bloody scene. A body was sprawled on the garage floor. Next to the victim, shell casings and a message.
When I arrived, the detective said to me, "Sir, it's Turk Scott." I said, "The delegate?" He said, "Yes, sir."
Indeed, State Delegate Turk Scott lay on the floor, his body riddled with bullets. A Baltimore City politician executed, but also a man whose darker side had just been exposed. Shortly before the shooting, Scott had been indicted for bringing 10 kilos of heroin into the city. An indictment not just of Scott, but of the city itself. But it wasn't just the feds who were after Scott. In his final seconds, the bail bondsman turned politician faced a judge, jury, and executioner with a different set of rules. No indictments, no trials, and no mercy. Black October.
It looked like an execution. I think they were trying to send a message.
Black October. A group claiming they executed Scott for bringing drugs into the city.
What I first noticed was sheets of paper spread around the body. There were dozens of them.
These persons, unknown drug dealers, selling drugs is an act of treason. The punishment for treason is death. Black October. Black October. Black October.
Letter to the editor, Afro-American newspaper, 1973. It is because pushers want to deny life to the Black community that Black October exists. To do otherwise is to practically allow the inquisitive luster to fade from the eyes of the Black child. Anyone who claims this is genocide, let them live with those who openly conspire to destroy the Black community. The Black Pusher.
Baltimore City, 1973. A politician named Turk Scott, a suspected heroin dealer, is gunned down. A killing that puts the city on edge. A mysterious vigilante group, Black October, claims responsibility. Tasked with solving the crime, homicide detective Stephen Tabeling.
The paper said Black October. We had heard of them before, but didn't know a lot about them. This was no ordinary murder. The first thing that caught my eye was a rolled-up newspaper. It looked like something that you could put a shotgun in. At least one of the wounds that killed Scott came from a shotgun. It looked like this could be an important clue. We sent the newspaper to the crime lab for analysis. There were 21 confirmed fingerprint points on each document that we sent to the crime lab.
A vital clue, in fact, on the newspaper, fingerprints. But not just anyone's fingerprints. A handprint that linked Scott's murder to one of Baltimore's most prominent Black families. A family that came to embody African-American success in a city that had once been home to slaves. And now Sherman Dobson, the nephew of the great Reverend Dobson, was implicated in the murder. Could it be true? Could Sherman Dobson be the executioner of Turk Scott? Could he be the trigger man for one of the city's most notorious murders?
The fingerprints came back, and it was Sherman Dobson. One of my detectives had arrested him before, so we got a search and seizure warrant for his house.
So Tabeling and his squad of detectives arrive at the home of Sherman Dobson to conduct a search he would not soon forget.
I had 7 officers with me, just 7. Reverend Vernon Dobson answered the door. I remember he was very polite and cooperative. We searched Sherman's bedroom and we found several guns in the closet. We also found a shotgun in the basement, a pretty serious collection of weapons.
But tests show that the confiscated guns were not used to murder Scott. But armed with fingerprints and the identification of the cab driver, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Sherman Dobson. The charge, first-degree murder. And as the case unfolded, the question of who pulled the trigger that day would go far beyond guilt. On trial was the soul of the city itself. And so, a trial. The stakes high, the headlines loud. Both sides dug in for war.
The courtroom was packed. The press coverage was intense. It wasn't a typical murder trial. I think we had a strong case. Fingerprints on the newspaper, the witness testimony. I certainly didn't have any doubts.
The prosecution makes its case, a straightforward assertion of guilt. The fingerprints on the newspaper, the testimony of the cab driver. But when the prosecution rested, the real trial began. Dobson's lawyers turned the tables.
To this day, I don't understand it.
In his version, over 100 cops conduct a search. The tale of police misconduct. The type of overreaching that resonated well with the black community.
We didn't have 100 officers. It was orderly, legal, and by the book.
But the damage was done. Reverend Dobson's testimony did indeed turn the tables. The prosecution was forced to recall Tabeling. His job to refute the story.
I was on the witness stand for a half a day. I had to read the logs of all officer activity the day of the search. Every last cop in the city. My testimony was supposed to show that I didn't have 100 cops. But all I think that I accomplished was put the jury to sleep.
But true or not, the focus was off Sherman Dobson and onto the police. And during the trial, Black October struck again. Another alleged drug dealer shot dead. So while the jury deliberated, so did the city. Not just about police tactics and the fate of Sherman Dobson, but the question of when can we kill? Was the murder of Turk Scott justice? Were police in this case on the wrong side of the law? And what good is a law if it can't protect the innocent? And then the jury spoke. The verdict: not guilty, 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 not guilty. The jury had spoken. Sherman Dobson acquitted. The courtroom erupted. The state's case refuted. Stunned is Lieutenant Stephen Tabeling.
I was surprised, there's no doubt about it. We made a good case, and I think politics trumped justice. But you have to respect the jury.
But the case wasn't over for Sherman. The jury found him guilty of of kidnapping the cab driver.
It was a conviction, but he appealed. A higher court sent it back to be retried, but it never happened. A few years later, Sherman shot a cop in cold blood and ended up back in jail.
After the trial, Black October struck again. Another drug dealer executed. Another act of vengeance, prompting Tabeling to act.
We knew 6 people were in Black October. I put a pair of men on each one of them, and one by one, they just disappeared. Even for me, Black October was still a mystery.
After the trial, the drug business continued to thrive. The war against it waged at a heavy cost. The death toll measured in thousands. But even more telling is this. Since the murder of Scott, the city's population is nearly half. A mass exodus left behind a hollowed out version of yesterday's city. And so, the words of Hamlet, do they mean anything here? On this abandoned street, in this land of vacants, what's the use of vengeance in a city that has emptied? The question of why do we kill, or if we can, seems pointless. A question that should have been asked before everyone left.